Thanks everybody that's here. We hope we can give you maybe some new information, new ideas, and maybe help change your perspective a little bit, because the more places I talk around the world, what I find is the amount of resistance to wanting to change sort of some of the thought process. And so hopefully we're going to try to talk about inflammation and why it impacts longevity and what does it do. So if we look at inflammation, we think about the things that we assign to inflammation. If you look up the dictionary definition, go to Latin, and where did it come from? It talked about things like heat, redness, swelling, pain, loss of function, were all things that came in under the idea of inflammation. If we look at where we're going to go in this talk, and what I want to do is, read the signs and figure out where we're going, what we see is I first want to show you a little bit, define inflammation, at least give you some ideas. And inflammation is actually a very complex deal to study, all right? Because not everything gives the same signals. You get a lot of different responses that happen when we have the occurrence of inflammation. And so we're going to look at some of these, and then what we're going to do is look at some examples of inflammation and why and how it connects to the pig industry and decreases your productivity. So if we look at this and we think about it, just a simple one of inflammation is breaking the barrier of the skin. Okay, we get something, a sliver, drives through the skin, we get this, and we get a signaling process that we get leakage from the blood system that then allows the immune system to come in and try to take care of this. Now, very simplified, inflammation, what does it include? It increases the clotting mechanism activity. It increases blood flow if we've got inflammation. We increase capillary permeability. This is how it gets those immune cells out to the area that got damaged. It enhances influx of phagocytic cells. Neutrophils arrive in about 30 to 60 minutes. And then our macrophage and lymphocytes will usually be about 5 to 6 hours and persist if the inflammation is still there. So that's kind of just a general pattern of what happens. If we look at all the cells to the immune system, my point isn't to teach you about the immune reactions. I want to show you how it impacts what happens in the pig industry for you. But if we look at this, whoops, I'm sorry. Oops, hit the wrong button twice. If we take a look at this, look at all the different cells that actually get involved in this. When you start looking at the pathways and all the systems that get triggered from a single inflammatory moment, it's just amazing the number of things that go off. A lot of them don't mean much. Some of them are very, very important, but all of them are different depending which signals we actually are releasing. So our issue is, if we've got an inflammatory moment, we've got to make sure that the quicker we can get that problem resolved, the better we go back to normal production. What we want to show is, why does it impact production so much in the pig industry? So if we look at nutrient partitioning with inflammation, one of the things that's intriguing with this is that most animals that have an inflammatory response will eat less. So if they've got an inflammation going on, they're going to likely consume less feed. So that's the first thing. They don't even intake as much. They still have to fulfill the process of maintenance, body maintenance. But now, instead of going to our production phases like lactation, what happens is the immune system is picking up and requiring, hey, we've got to change things, we've got a problem, and it shifts a lot of the nutrient profiles to the immune system. It changes the amino acids that it needs. It increases the amount of energy that's needed for it. And we're going to try to show you, we've got some experiments now, just recently, that have been done, that we can show you that it really has a bigger impact on what metabolic things are actually altering and the amount of energy disparity that actually gets utilized when we activate the immune system. Now, we know in the pig industry, if I've got an inflammatory problem, all right, let's take an ulcer, let's take lameness, let's take a disease. Any of these, what you watch is that sow has to spend more time taking nutrients off her body to try to help feed those piglets. And it's because her immune system's taking it up. And a lot of our immune system signals are actually telling her, you better eat less because we might have more gut leakage because we've got a problem going on. So we've got this conflict of what's going on. And what we get, particularly if this is a first parity female, what I've done is I have this cascade and I'm low on the amount of nutrients left for reproduction. All right? So you start to see we can get into some impacts that may cause us real issues. This is a project that was done at Iowa State University. Nicole Huntley published this with Dr. John Patience was her advisor on this. And it's an interesting one looking at the effect of treatment on energy balance, maintenance energy requirement, nutrient deposition. So as we look at this, look at heat production, what we see is our control animals. This one is an enzyme. They added beta mannanase to this diet. And the other diet was LPS, and they injected LPS 4 times from day 10 to day 16. And every 48 hours, they injected an LPS injection, trying to give them an inflammatory response. So what they were trying to get a measurement of was, what did it do to the issue of heat production? What did it do? It increased the heat production when we had an inflammation. We look at retained energy and look at our amount of retained energy from a lipid standpoint, and what we see, we have a reduction here. Less lipid was captured in that system, again, significant. Estimated metabolizable energy of maintenance, and what do we see? 239, these two. The enzyme made no difference in the diet. But look at the issue when we gave it an inflammatory issue. Look at this. Our metabolizable energy for maintenance goes way up. It's increasing. Again, significant. Nutrient deposition, grams per day of protein, 87, 78, 69. Not significant, but moving towards that trend. And what you'll find is protein isn't the bigger deficit. The bigger deficit's with energy. The energy is the one that we get into real trouble, and again, is highly significant. So as we look at average daily gain from day 10 to day 16 in this experiment with these piglets, what we see is that we got a big impact on performance of these animals. Where did it go? It went to heat production. It went to energy of maintenance. And what we see is our nutrient utilization's very, very different when we get an inflammatory response. So we talk about inflammation, and where we get, let's give you a few examples here in a second. So if we look at this and look at the summary, or what do we want to think about, decreased average daily gain to increased metabolizable maintenance, independent of the changes in feed intake in immune-challenged pigs. 23% increase in energy partitioning to the immune system. It's huge. No other thing modifies that immune system or modifies metabolism as much as inflammation does. All right? Decrease in lipid deposition and weight gain. So all those are our summaries to this. One more time, a really simple diagram for you from the veterinary colleges, etc. My apologies. I'm making it very simple so that those animal scientists can understand maybe what we got going on here. But typically, any stressor that you create for that animal, you are signaling to the body, and whether it's cell damage, whether it's gut leakage, if it's any type of insult to the body, is going to release what we call pro-inflammatory mediators or cytokines. The two most potent ones, TNF-alpha, interleukin-1 alpha, and interleukin-1 beta, are mediators that are going to signal the brain, signal the liver, and actually talk to the whole cascade of our epithelial tissue that, whoa, we got a problem. Houston, we really have a problem here. So it's trying to switch, and it's going to try to spare nutrients for the issue of the immune system so it gets this straightened out. To the liver, what's it do? It now starts making acute phase proteins, one of our issues to help try to solve some of the problems, and it decreases IGF-1. It's decreasing production issues. So, it's very simplified. It depends each specific inflammatory and insult that you're talking about as to what the real result is with each one of these. And so they're not the same. This one, I just want to make one point. We've got the innate immune system, the adaptive immune system. We know the immune system's got a great setup, beautiful design. Here's the piece. We often forget about our human responsibility to make sure we're doing all the things we can to cut down on the stressors and inflammatory issues, potentially in a building. So things like stockmanship, biosecurity, hygiene, some of these things, which are a lot of the topics here at the symposium this week. So, okay, you got a lame sow now, and this sow actually can barely stand that we had up there on the screen. If you watch her and watch the video, I'm sorry it didn't transfer from my system to this computer, but if you look what happened with her, she can't hardly stand there, but she's doing a great job of feeding her pigs. But what's she doing? She's gant, she's losing muscle mass, fat tissue off her body. She's trying to feed those pigs, take care of them. She's not going to come back and do very well with reproduction this next go around. Now, I put one of these up. Thank you, Jason and team, all right, that's done all the work with this. But I want to show you something with this that's really a thing that needs to be emphasized a bit. If we take a look, we have our issues of the unknown. Here's the piece that just fascinates me. We know how to fix this issue of lameness. We can help people figure out how to get this done. But lameness is one of the biggest drivers for mortality. It's one of the biggest drivers for a lot more problems with inflammation that ever get recognized. So if we show you a little bit behind this, what happens, this is a cell culture tissue thing that they're looking at. So this is an animal level. We're going to show you an animal level in just a second. But they went in, drilled a hole in the sole of the foot of these dairy cattle, pulled out the corium tissue, and raised them in a petri dish. Then what they did is they put inflammatory cytokines in there, or pro-inflammatory mediators, TNF-alpha, interleukin-1 alpha, and what you see is the tissue, these keratinocytes, proliferate and grow very well. When we add the inflammatory component, look what happens. The keratinocytes quit proliferating. They're not growing at the same rate. They don't heal as well. If you watch the real issue to lameness, it is not about the mineral content. We've measured it multiple times between good feet and bad feet. Guess what? They're almost exactly the same. We find out it's about inflammation. If you change inflammation, we'll try to show you the picture and what happens with this. All right. So we did a big project in dairy cattle, and a very expensive project, etc. But this project, they published 6 different papers off of one project. But what's interesting in this is this. 22 control cows, 22 that were fed on our ZPM or organic mineral component. If we look at milk production, a very big difference in the amount of milk production between the 2 groups of cows. The piece I want to show you, though, is the issue with the lameness issue. This is nothing more. They actually walked them, did all the things of watching these cows walk. They had no difference in locomotion scores between the 2 treatments. But they had a huge difference in the issue of the amount of inflammation on the heels of these cows, and quite severe. So heels and digital dermatitis, and on this one, very mild. And so 8 of 10, 3 of 9 in this group. One of the cows from this group got ketosis and is actually removed from the model. And so what we see is we had a big difference on what happened with their issue with the hoof and what was the inflammatory moment. So this is showing you one of those hooves off one of those cows. And what you see with this trace mineral, and looking at messenger RNA expression at 30 days postpartum on these cows. So we fed them 30 days prior. We fed them for 30 days after. Now what we're looking at is KRT5 is the messenger RNA for keratinocytes. So my first time I saw this, my reaction was, oh wow, our product failed. Well, that's not the case. Why this reaction is upregulated for this one is because the feet were this bad. It's trying to heal them up. It's trying to increase the amount of keratinocyte proliferation to get those feet healed up. Now, the interesting thing with this is that if we jump to this slide quick and go back to thinking about inflammation, now if we look at both of these, we measured interleukin-1 beta, we measured TNF-alpha, which are the messenger RNA components for both of these. And what we see is inflammation is way up, inflammation is way up. These are on a log scale. It's a big difference. If the feet have an inflammatory problem, they don't heal. The tissue cannot heal up. So, interesting that inflammation is a really big player in this. If we go back one and you look at this one, BTD stands for biotinidase, messenger RNA. Biotinidase recaptures the gluing substance around the cells and remolds it, makes it so that the tissue is much better. Here's something I never knew. I was completely wrong on the concept of this. But biotinidase, or biotin, basically works on feet that are in really good shape and good quality. It does not work on feet that are in bad quality. Right? Just the opposite of what actually happens in the field most of the time. They see a hoof with a crack, oh, I got to up my biotin. Not likely. It doesn't react that way. It reacts when the keratinocyte tissue is in really great shape, then it's really trying to glue those and hold those together. All right. I want to show you one more quick one. This is a big study that we did, and did it on a big system, 380 sows per treatment. We trimmed their feet on the one group. The control group, or the treated group, was trimmed feet, and the control group was not trimmed. 380 animals. They had to have more than 6 centimeter toe length. The normal toe length for a sow is about 5 centimeters. So we wanted it long enough that it made a big enough difference in that we were getting the sows that were uncomfortable with toes, etc. Here's what's intriguing with this. We took a look at all kinds of data. But look at this. The parity after they were trimmed, They were 4/10 higher for the number of pigs born alive, 6/10 higher for the number of pigs born alive in the third farrowing. Just by making their feet more comfortable, we got a big boost in production. Now, I should know that, particularly all the issues I have with my feet, so I have to buy very expensive shoes to make sure my feet don't ache and hurt. But guess what? The sows maybe have the same thing. It's how much issue can they take with this stress? Here's what you're looking at. This is with pigs. It was done in a study in Greece. And we take a look at this. What they looked at was claws without lesions. And when they look at the tubules, which are the dark purple spots in here, and you look at the amount of keratinocyte tissue around these, what it shows you is you have a lot more keratinocytes wrapped around each one of those tubules. It's better quality horn tissue. With that, it means it's stronger. You're not going to get into near as many problems with it. Here's showing you if you've got inflammation. Look at these tubules. They're bleeding. They're increased in size. Look at the density. I have way less keratinocyte tissue in those horns where I've got problems with those tubules. It's about inflammation. You've got to reduce inflammation if you want to get rid of the stressor, particularly the issue of the feet. All right, we're going to speed up here a little bit. Let's look at mastitis for just a second, or with somatic cell count. And we hadn't done much with this in pigs. We now have done our third project. We're going to start about 2 more projects with this. But what's interesting, this is a project that was done in Barcelona, Spain. And what they did is took a look at somatic cell count in the colostrum and in the milk. And what we see is we had a very different difference between the 2 dietary treatments, control and then a treated group with mineral source, etc. And equivalent or iso to each other for all minerals. And what we see is we have a very big difference in what happened with somatic cell count. More fascinating than that with this, in the dairy industry, we know when we decrease somatic cell count, we also see a nice rise in what happens with milk production. We think the same thing happened in this project. The sows, we knew the amount of feed that each sow group had and to what they were exposed to or what disappeared. Feed disappearance, what we see is that those sows ate essentially the same. What we see, though, they had a very big difference on the production, milk production, what they did for those piglets, and looking at weaning weights, weight of gain. And so we are putting more and more effort looking at more issues dealing with somatic cell count. Somatic cells are just measuring the amount of inflammatory issues that you've got with the mammary gland. All right? Gut leakage. We've got several studies looking at the issue of that we get into gut leakage, particularly, and there's all kinds of things that can help contribute to this. Heat stress. We can talk about microtoxins. And any of these that break, any issues that break these strands of protein, the claudins and the occludins, this is the most important junction to keep this pathway from tissues and organisms in the intestinal tract from getting to the bloodstream. And so we take our cartoon amplification here and show it. This is what we're trying to protect when we have the issue of heat stress. If we look at this, this is showing you even a lot of the things that cause a disruption of this. And when you actually get a breakdown and the paracellular pathway opens up, guess what? It signals the bacteria, hey guys, guess what? We got free reign here. Attack the actual enterocytes of the intestinal cells of the villi. And that's what happens. We get damage to this. We get gut leakage. We now got quite a severe inflammation. Very similar to just saying LPS got into the system. A lot of long-distance athletes deal with this kind of problem because they overexert, they drink enough water, and get into problems with energy issues. If we look at Lawsonia intercellus ileitis, it's a big issue both in the horse industry, pig industry. The interesting one in this whole topic to me is if you talk to the disease centers and disease labs, they will tell you that 70% of the lesions they see in the intestinal tract are subacute lesions of ileitis. That's huge. So if that's the issue, what can we do to help reduce that kind of thing? There's a poster that's out here. It's poster number 25. Want to take a look at some of the things they're looking at and how this can be impacted, but we know we can actually figure out a way to help reduce those subacute lesions and decrease maybe that one. Ovarian issues. We've been talking about gilts today. I need to speed up, John. I will. And we take a look. Let's say another source of inflammation can be the reproductive tract. What if I don't get all the placenta out of there? I get, something that got left behind. Look at that. We've got all this vaginal discharge, etc. We often get an upregulation of the amount of LPS that gets into the bloodstream. The fascinating thing is the ovary, and particularly the follicular fluid, is very good at capturing LPS. So it pulls it from the bloodstream and pulls it in there. And guess what it's trying to do? It's trying to signal the ovary, hey, we're not doing real well. Maybe we better shut down for a time. And it does. You take these granulosa cells, they typically convert testosterone to progesterone. And in that process, what happens is the progesterone, the pathway for that, aromatase, I think it is, aromatase, sorry, got to remember all my biology here, and actually gets stopped, and we don't do the conversion from testosterone to this. How many gilts do we get into that we see? We get sort of like red vulvas. We think they're coming into heat. You take them to the board. They don't stand. Nothing happens. You get a lot of calls all the time on, my gilts aren't breeding. We've got to be more aware of these things. And if we take a look at this and look at ovarian dysfunction, and thank you, Dr. Ross, for your contribution here, and look at circulating estradiol and progesterone goes down, follicular genesis, estrous behavior. These two and puberty and this really are the pathways that cause a lot of problems with gilts. I can't tell you how many farms I get on, and they vaccinate 14 days before they're going to breed the female gilt. Guess what? You're putting the semen in when she's at her maximum for inflammatory response due to that vaccination. We've got to be more careful and aware of the things we're doing from an inflammatory standpoint. How do all these things tie? I love this slide because it makes some sense to me from the standpoint. If an animal starts to eat less, particularly first parity, what do we have? We've got signals that go to the brain and start telling the ovary to, whoa, we are maybe not ready really to get ready for this. Let's shut down on the amount of hormone. And that's what it signals. If it's low, and it's both low insulin for the hypothalamus, low insulin for the pituitary gland, but the overall result is you're decreasing the amount of output from the ovary. What does that do? That actually causes the issue that you start delaying the maturation. You actually increase the maturation process of those oocytes when the hormone decreases. So what happens is they're too old when they get fertilized, and a lot of those disappear and die. So what do we see with gilts that get late weaned estrus interval? There are a lot more problems with if they're day 7, day 8, day 9, this kind of thing, and they get bred. They have lower litter size. They don't have the same production that we'd expect. And that's what we see. We have a much better odds, particularly in the U.S., with if we've got day 3, day 4, day 5 females, these all tend to be very successful for farrowing rate and for our number of piglets. Skip that. And so if we take a look, there's all kinds of inflammatory things that are hitting the news and a lot more pathways that are being evaluated. A lot of these are all in the human realm, but we're finding inflammation is a lot more the problem in many of these issues. I hope today I gave you a few ideas that production, particularly in the industry for pork production, is really about this issue. You've got to control inflammation. It's a major modifier of metabolism. It's going to change how they use nutrients. Reducing inflammation issues in the swine herd improves productivity. Decreasing inflammatory issues improves longevity.